Hello everybody and welcome to the Photography Post-Processing with Affinity Photo workshop. So today we'll be looking at the getting into Affinity Photo, the program, and just looking at how to get things going with like with an iPad. We'll look at some of the desktop things as well, and just think about what processing means, how we can use Affinity Photo. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Affinity Photo is, it's essentially a low-cost alternative to Adobe Photoshop. So we offer it on all the digital arts computer stations, and this is available through our library partners. So in terms of who are our library partners, so I want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts. Then we also have our library partners. So we have the Blue Mountains Public Library, we have the Collingwood Public Library, and we have the Wasaga Beach Public Library. So at each of the library partners, what is available is there's iMac computers, and the iMac computers have the Affinity Suite, if you will, available on them. So that suite consists of some really cool software. So we have Affinity Photo, we have Affinity Designer, which is like Adobe Illustrator, and then we have Affinity Publisher, which is like Adobe InDesign. So a lot of really fun stuff that's happening. So in terms of the Affinity Photo software, it's right now it's also 50% off. So I just like to mention that because if you're looking to get it and you want to purchase it, usually it's about $75, but currently it is 50% off. So that's actually really cool because that way it comes to about $35 in a purchase price to get. So that makes it even more affordable. So it's a one-time fee, and then you can use it to to do any kind of photo post-processing work and so on. So that's always a really cool thing. So here's kind of what we have for it, and has all sorts of really cool things. So we're going to get into the basics, get going with it, and the other cool thing is if you'll see right here, it actually says it's available for the iPad. And that's the great part. So that for the iPad, I think it's about $15, and that is fantastic because then you can just use it directly on your iPad. And that's the really cool thing about it, is that it can be used directly on the iPad. So just like I have it here it is. I can open it up, and I have Affinity Photo directly on the iPad. And that is a pretty cool thing. So instead of having to go to a desktop or anything like that, I can work directly in this iPad environment. So I can bring in photos. So if you're using your iCloud, you have photos, and you're bringing things in that way, you can make it work and happen by having the iPad software. So you can work directly in the iPad. So you no longer have to put things onto the desktop. So you can do everything directly in the iPad. So how do we get started with the iPad? So let's kind of look at the Affinity Photo overview, the menu. What does it look like? How does it work? So to really get started, it's pretty simple. We just hit the plus, and we can say, hey, open from Photos. So if you're familiar with the Apple software and the iOS, you have photos that are directly on your iPad, and those photos can be accessed in here. So I took some photos just before the workshop. So I'm going to go right here and say, hey, let's go to my recent photos. So I can just say, okay, like here's some recent photos, and I can say, let's take this this photo right here. So it's going to load it, and there we go. So we have the photo, and I took something that has a lot of kind of contrast and potential issues in working with it, and how can we make it work. So with photo post-processing specifically, and we're calling it photo post-processing, but it's also the concept of image manipulation. right? So we can do the photo post processing. We can change colors. We can work on that. But it could also just be an image, right? So this could also be applied to, let's say you did a digital illustration and you want to work on it too. So it's really image post processing. It could also just be photography based and so on. So on the side, some of the panels here. So what I'm going to do is, let me just see here. I just want to make sure that we can see. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if I go to the side here, there's these like adjustment layers, and I'm going to show this on the desktop after as well. But I just want to show quickly. I can go into like brightness, contrast. So here, for example, if I just want to make the image brighter, so that's with brightness, contrast, more contrast. I can go to curves, and that's the really cool thing, is that it will let me get into all of these different curve areas and so on. So directly in that in these adjustments. So how this works is you end up with these adjustment layers, and what that means is you can do all of the work with Affinity Photo. It's a fantastic tool, and that is the simplicity of it. So you just go to the App Store, you download it, and you can make it work from there. So that takes us from there. How do we get from our iPad to the desktop? So let's look at now in the desktop, you'll see it's a little bit, we get all the layers going and all that. So I'm just gonna get it going here. Let's just go right over here to my desktop. So I have Affinity Photo. This is the icon right here. We're gonna open it right up. We're gonna get right into the tools and the software. So I'm just gonna close this up, and you can see the interface is, it looks very much like Photoshop. It's not too different. So I'm just gonna go to full screen here. And so what's the breakdown here? So we have here's like showing that these are the photo persona. So we have these different personas on the top. So let's just kind of take us through what's on this blank canvas first. Photo persona, we have a liquify persona, we have a develop persona, we have a tone mapping persona, and we have an export persona. So what do these personas mean? So the way they've designed it is that there's specific tools or specific attributes of tools and adjustments within each persona. So right now, if I'm in the photo persona, it's going to give me specific tools, and I can change it to the different personas. So let's just look at what that means as we flip these around. So and it's asking me to get into layers. So let's get something in here first. Okay, so we're gonna do file new, right? And we're gonna say, okay, what do we want to do? So we're gonna do a new photo, and we're gonna say let's make this one 4x6, create. Okay, there we go. So we got our 4x6 photo, and now on the side here, we have the histogram, we have colors, swatches, brushes. So again, very similar to what's in Photoshop. And then we have adjustments. So we can play with all the different adjustments, and that's really key for our photo post-processing. We have layers, effects, styles, and stock. So you can also go to stock footage, right? So that's how that will work. Okay, now to bring in a photo, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place. So I'm going to find my photo, and I have them right here. I have, where were those again? We had photos for workshops. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to click it there. And now what I can do is I can kind of figure out, where do I want it? Because this is a bit of a different aspect ratio. So I'm just going to put it in here. Okay, let's get it in the route here. Okay, so we got our photo. It's all in there, right? And you can see that's the first layer right here. So it's like the image, and we go from there. So now from this photo, this is just like a full, we're not dealing with raw or anything. So in next week, we're going to look at bringing in raw photos and then doing the post-processing work in that manner, right? So, so we got our navigator. So here we can like zoom in or out, gives us a quick navigation. We have a transform, so we can change our canvas, and we have a history, what what we've been doing, and then we also have our channels. So here you can turn each channel off. So you can say, okay, here's the blue only, here's the green, and here's red, green, and blue. So the images consist of red, green, and blue. And then you can see up here on the histogram, it's showing us red, green, and blue, and how that looks in terms of what's the brightest and all that fun stuff. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is let's look at adjustments. So what can we do with the adjustments? So we got our main layer here. So here we have all these adjustments. We got levels, white balance, HSL, so hue, saturation, luminance. We have recolor, black and white, brightness, contrast, posterize, vibrance, exposure, shadows, highlights, threshold, curves, channel mixer, gradient map, selective color, color balance, invert, soft proof LUT or a lookup table, lens filter, split toning, and then OCIO. Okay, so what does all this mean? So we can look at, okay, what do we want to do? So maybe if we say, okay, this is a bit dark, how can we deal with it? So on the top here, we have our tools, like we have our like selection tool, we have a crop tool, so we can make things smaller. Command Z, again, is our friend to undo anything. We can select an area, like this area, and so on and so forth. So lots of tools, just like in Photoshop, paint bucket, change the colors, brushes, erase tools, all of that same very familiar things that if you've used any kind of Photoshop type or other photo processing software, it would work that way. So let's look at the first step. So I just want to look at exposure here. So let's look at that. So here we got some great presets. So we can just go, hey, go back to default. That's what it's like in the beginning. Then I can say, okay, let's look at +1. I can look at +2 stops, brighter, -2 stops, right? Making it darker. And you quickly get an idea of what's happening with that. And you can see what happened here. The exposure adjustment is an adjustment layer. So right up here, this is the great thing, is that it's an adjustment layer. So I can just go turn it off, and it's back to the default of the image. So everything we do is this adjustment layer. So we can keep turning them on or off. So it's not like it's baked into the final image. I think that's a really cool thing about how it just automatically works that way. And I'm really happy with that process. Okay, so let's say we just want to go, we're going to say one stop. Let's go back to default. Let's say, okay, we want one stop like that. And we say, okay, that's nice. Okay, we can also do it manually. So you can see we can go like way like overexposing it. We can go way underexposing it, and so on. So I'm just going to stay with one stop. Say, okay, that's nice. Now let's look at, we can look at the white balance, and do we want it warmer or cooler? So here's warmer, here's cooler, right? And same thing, I go to the layers, and now our white balance adjustment layer is here. So I can keep that coolness, I can toggle it on or off. You can see in the histogram how it's adding a lot more blue, and then here it's taking it away, right? So that's that adjustment layer. Okay, so let's go back into this and say, okay, well, you can see right here is the white balance tool. So this is important. So let's say, we talked about this a bit in some of the other workshops, but your white balance, are you balanced for daylight? Are you balanced for tungsten, or where is it? You can also think of it as a general, like, do we want an image to be cooler? So I can go really, really cool. So this is a winter image. So I can go really, really cool, or I can go really, really warm, and contrast that cold winter with this warm sunlight. So maybe this is a weird, twilight. Something's happening in the night, and we want to tell that story. So let's just go. Okay, we're going to make this a bit cooler. Then we can also tint it. We can say, well, where do we want a little more green to that cool? Do we want a little more magenta? Right? So we might say, okay, let's make it a little bit green. So it's not too cool, but it's just that kind of nice look to it. So that's nice. Again, within the layers, that's all under the white balance adjustment. So I can toggle it on or off. Right? So that's great. Okay. So now let's look at something else. We'll say, okay, well, let's look at the overall brightness contrast. So we can say, let's increase the contrast. And then it always comes up with these nice menus that are right here. So we can say, okay, let's go a little bit more contrast. I can bring the brightness down. And again, maybe I want that really like dark forest look and in the contrast. What does it do? Again, we have our layer and we can turn that on or off and see the before and after. Great. Okay, let's try another adjustment. Let's go to the hue saturation zone. So here, if I hit the default, so now what I'm able to do is I can shift the hue, I can shift the saturation, how much saturation, and then the luminosity. So how much luminance the color has, like how powerful the color is. So that's the overall, it's like a brightness of specifically the color. So I can bring that down, let's say. We can take all the saturation out to make it black and white. We can add more saturation to make it like really vibrant in that. So I can add more blue, but I can make that blue not very bright, or I can make it very bright. So I'm going to bring it down a bit so that blue's like that. And then here, the whole hue shift, we can change it to, making it more magenta, red, and so on. So I'll just kind of leave it like that. Okay, so that's perfect. So that's great. So again, back to the layers, and we have our HSL, hue saturation luminance adjustment is right there. We can turn it on or off. Okay, let's continue with some more adjustment tools here. Let's look at recolor. So we can say, okay, let's make it fire. Right, these are just some presets. Say, okay, do we like that? Don't really like that as much. So I go back to the, oops. So this is another way you can do too. So we can go to the opacity. We can say, we want a little bit of recoloring. Maybe there's a little bit of some red coming back into it. We can say, okay, that's fine. Again, back to the layers, and we can do that. We can turn it on or off. So you can see there's a little bit of red that's coming in there. Okay. And then we can click on these just if we want to turn them off, if we want a little more real estate on our menus here. So then we can play with, so that exposure was there. Okay, let's look at curves. That's always a really important one. So we'll look at curves. This is that beautiful curve concept here. So with the curve, we can put different points, dots. And traditionally there's this kind of S-curve idea where you put something here in the higher range, and then you put something kind of on the lower or the toe to kind of make more contrast. Right? We can also make the brighter spots a bit darker. So we can do that on the overall master. We can also play with it in the red. So we can just say, okay, let's play with the reds and bring them up a little bit. And you can see how interesting that is. It just kind of adjusts the brightness of the reds in that image. We can also say, let's look at the blue and play with, maybe the blue, make it a little bit brighter. And, playing with those curves. So those curves are really let you curve the color and the image into what you like. Traditionally, there's usually 2 to 3 points, doing a little bit in these highlight areas up here, a little bit here in the dark or toe of the curve, it's called. right? And this is, again, this is really cool because if you do this kind of photo post-processing work, you can also apply this to like, again, your image work. So if you did a illustration, digital painting, and also in the video world. So color correction, post-processing is what's done in the video side of things. It's same, very similar type of concepts of what's happening. So shadows, highlights, so let's look at that. Here we can increase or decrease the shadows. So we can make our shadows really dark, right? And then we can also bring the highlights up. So we can like blow out the highlights like that. We can also make the highlights a bit darker. So we can bring that sky down a little bit. And that's actually looking kind of nicer to me, in my opinion. So that's nice. And that's again, so again, going back to the layers, we can toggle these. Okay, do we like that? Do we like this adjustment, right? And you can turn them all off to take us back to that original image, which is this. That's the original image. Then we start to turn on, we did exposure adjustment, white balance, brightness, contrast, the hue, saturation, luminance, or HSL. We have the recolor, curves, and shadows, highlights. We can also play in the black and white world. Maybe you don't want it to be color. We can just go right into these like black and white concepts of, you know, what do we want it to look like. We can go cold, we can go warm. Really quick ways to do some black and white. This takes the saturation out, very different type of image, and then we can start working with it in that way. So again, I can always, you know, reduce this. So maybe I'm making it a little bit black and white. You can see how we can play with that, where just in the opacity down here, we can say, hey, let's just make it a little bit kind of like it's monochromatic like that, just like 20%. Little fun things that we can just use to play with, you know, what we're working with. Vibrance, we can play with the overall vibrance of the image. So you can see that the color is more vibrant and the saturation. Desaturating it. So you can just take the saturation out and make it black and white in that kind of manner. We can make it super saturated to make it very blue. So I kind of like it maybe here somewhere. Right, so that's that part, shadows, highlights. We can go to the channel mixer. And this is cool because this lets you mix the different channels. So the red, green, blue, to play around with what you're doing in each kind of amount of adjustments. So in red, green, blue, how much are you adding, taking away in that kind of manner? So that can work well. Let's go to selective color. So this lets you work with the cyan, magenta, yellow area. And I think we need to actually, yeah, it's just relative to what's happening in our image, and we're not using those, so we're going to just delete that. We don't need that one at all. Okay, let's go to color balance. We'll look at here. So here's just like, you know, how much do we have of each one? Do we go more cyan? Do we go more red? Right, Command Z if we want to just get back there. Do we want a little bit more yellow or more blue? And we can play in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So let's say the shadows we want to be very blue. Let's say in the highlights we want them to be a little bit warmer. Right, so we can really manipulate the image to move around, you know, where we want that to be and how we want it to react to the overall image. And then we can also say what happens in the midtones. So midtones, that kind of middle range. Right, so just all those selective options. Okay, and then we can play with something like they have these lens filters, so you know you can put different filters on. So you know, different types of filters. So basically, you can put like a filter on the image and give it that kind of a different look. You can add noise to it. So you're basically making like your own kind of in-camera type of filter. So you can make it like, as if you're through this kind of orange filter and, making it very different looking, right? So interesting kinds of things that can happen. And you can make presets there. So that's actually a good point to bring up here. So you can say, okay, this is a orange filter preset, right? And that can go into the preset. We go, okay, that's great. So that's allows us to do some of these fun, like as if they're in camera in front of the lens, like filtration things, and that works there. We can this posterize one. This is that kind of. I'm not a big fan of posterizing, but you can, you can really play with what what it does. But we're just going to get rid of that. I'm not a big fan of the posterizing, but it's there. It's available. Then the overall levels here too. So this is where you can play with the black level and the white level. Gamma being like your color. So you can increase the gamma to make it brighter or darker, if you will, or reduce and increase. White level. So overall, what's the brightest area? So you can play with where's this white level and making it super bright, and it tells you right here on the actual level area. And then you can say your black level, you can make things darker until they're totally dark, right? So it's just it's basically adding starting. Where's your start point for the black level, and then where's your start point for the white level? So just bringing everything up or bringing everything down, if you will. So it's a little bit of a contrasting idea, but that's and then we also have our output black level. So this is raising it in the output. You can see like we're bringing those things really bright, and then this is reducing the white level output. And then we saw with the gamma, like we're overall playing with the gamma range. So I often like to put the gamma just a touch brighter, and then it gives you just a little more pop on an image. Right, so that works really well. Okay, we can play with these inverts, where you invert the whole image, so you get like this X-ray image. Really cool tool, and there isn't too much you can do with it. You're just inverting, and then you can do all the other adjustments again, based on how you want to deal with it. But it's a pretty cool image tool, where you can just make things inverted, look like an X-ray, and it's a pretty neat idea. So again, if I go to the layers here, I simply can turn that on or off. Right, so you can see what the difference is. It's a pretty cool, it's a fun tool as well. Right, so if I want to get rid of any kind of adjustment layer, I can just drag it to the garbage can here too, and it just goes whoof, and it's gone. And that's really a simple way to do it. Okay, so these are all the adjustment layers. So remember, we have our original image, and then I have all these adjustment layers on top that I've added to the photo to manipulate it, change shadows, black and white, do all of these types of things. Now, this is not a raw image. This is just a JPEG still image, and it's, has what's called, everything's baked into it. So we're not working with a raw image. Next week, we're going to look at bringing in a raw photo, and then all the additional tools you get by working with a raw photo and file as well. So let's go. Let's look back at these personas. I guess. Oh, so we need the RGB layer. So we're going to work on these in the raw. I think this is where it's a export persona. Yeah. So it just wants us to work in the appropriate type of file. So we'll get into that one when we get into the raw. So then effects, there's things like this, glows and things. They're not going to really apply, but you know, there can be like these different styles that you could you know, like do, and not necessarily anything great, but they are styles. So you can say, hey, gold art, right? So you can quickly put a quick style on it. So, you know, if you're kind of pushed for time and you need to get something quick, you can always just put a gold art tool on it. Frost, there we go. So really kind of trying to bring a little bit of that Instagram idea. You know, you can just quickly put something in. It's kind of a cool effect, strange too. You know, definitely gives you a bit of a style. Let's see the retro style, right? Just like old photos. And you know, not bad. Like some of these definitely are can work. Um, let's see what neon does. Probably make it crazy. I don't even see anything after. But you know, kind of neat stuff. Let's see this one again. Yeah, I like that one. It's kind of a neat, like old photo with over saturation and blown out to like imagery happening. So, and I'm just going Command Z on that. So again, so that's just, you know, you're working on that overall image, and you can see the difference there is that the styles they don't come in as an adjustment layer. And I think that's really important, is that under the adjustments, that's the really cool thing, is that you can do all those adjustment layers and work with it, you know, in these kinds of areas, right? And then remember here under the history, I have, you know, all these, everything we do is in the history here. It has tons, all the history, all the stuff we're doing is there. And I think that's a great thing. So yeah, you can see the adjustments here, color we can play with. Now, I guess the other thing I'd like to mention too is, so we can make copies of this. So we can group. So I just want to see if it works like the same idea here. I'm gonna do a copy, paste. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we made a copy like that. I'm just trying to figure out, it's a little bit different than Photoshop. Okay, so yeah, so we got our layer effects, we have our live filters, we have our adjustment layers here, and so on. So here I made a copy. So I just simply right-clicked, copy, paste. So now I got a copy of the image. So if I turn it around, so there's that one, there's that one. So that's the other thing that's, I think, really important in any kind of photo manipulation, is I like to make a copy of it before I start to do any kind of effects or you know, kind of specialty work on it. So let's look at if we just want to kind of make a highlight zone. Let's say like just this top part here. And I'm going to invert the pixel selection, hit delete there. That's not what I wanted it to do. Okay, so we're going to find this little selection tool here. Oh, no, it doesn't want to work for me. Okay, so let's say we want to do that, and we want to play with an adjustment. You can see now I'm just working in that selection area. So it's a cool, quick way to, you know, select something, work in that zone, and play with that. So, you know, we can make things a bit darker there, and you can feather it out and so on. But that's how we would start to get into like selecting specific things to play with the exposure of that zone, right? Right, so that we have that in terms of the layers, that's that adjustment curve on that part. Right, so we're able to do that. Select just the zone, do it on that part. And it's not destructive, but again, it's just another adjustment layer. And so we can use that that marquee tool to, figure out that kind of an adjustment. And there's a freehand, so we can go in here and draw like a little selection around. This is just kind of rough. It's not going to be the most perfect selection, but so if we did something like that, and then we want to play with the exposure on that zone, you can see how we can quickly like make the sky dark, right? So this, again, just a really quick, I need to freehand that a lot better, but it gives you a quick idea of how we can take, part of the image and start to manipulate that in terms of the layers as well. Perfect. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, we can open it up too. If there are any questions looming, I'll put my email here too. So you can always email me if you're just wanting to figure out more about this software. Can you load it and so on. So tom@tbmcs.ca. You can send me an email. We have tons of great stuff on our website at tbmcs.ca, our website, the TBM Creator Space. Our YouTube channel, we have a lot on post-processing, photography, and more on Affinity Photo. So we have a few workshops about that already. And again, it's really, I'm quite used to Photoshop, so I'm kind of not as familiar with Affinity Photo, but I'm just jumping into it and finding things, and it's pretty easy to navigate and wrap your head around this software. It's very familiar, the user interface, as Photoshop. So just personally, I think it works, just as well. And if you don't have an iPad, don't have a desktop, or your desktop's a bit older and maybe you can't install Affinity Photo, not to worry. We have all our partner libraries with the iMac computers, and the iMacs come with the Affinity Suite installed. So Affinity Photo, Designer, and Publisher. So those are mirroring the Adobe software as well. So there isn't a monthly fee. This way, these are just $35 right now to buy. And then it has all the upgrades and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a great solution if you're into photography, want to do post-processing. What a great tool. And so this is the best thing. So I'm just going to get back to this here. So let's say we'll just leave it like that. Now, if we wanted to, how do we want to export this? So I can go, File. So first, we want to save this now. So I'm going to go Save As, and I'm going to say Creator Space Post-Processing Demo Photo A, right? And that saves it as an Affinity Photo file. So that's the first step we want to do. The next thing we need to do is I will go Export. And under Export, it gives you all these file formats. So you can do a PSD, so Photoshop document. You can do a PNG, you can do a JPEG, a GIF, a TIFF, PDF, SVG, EPS, so you can make it as a Illustrator file, EXR, HDR file, and so on. So that's a great thing. So even if you're working in Affinity Photo, you can use one of these PSD formats. You can send it to someone who might be doing further work for you in Photoshop, and they can open it as a Photoshop document. So it saves the same standard as a Photoshop file. That means you can do editing. So all the layers and adjustment layers will come into Photoshop, and it will allow anybody or yourself, if you want to further work on it in Photoshop, to work on it there. Otherwise, if you just export, so here's 32 megabytes if I do Photoshop, and if I do just a JPEG, it's 2.18. So this is what it would look like. So export, where do we want to do it? I'll just say save. It's going to export it. And what does that look like? It looks like this. So I had my original photo. I think it was this one, right? That's the original photo we did. And then here's our JPEG photo right here, right? So it's just in the 4:6 format. I zoomed it in a bit on the file and working on it, and we did all our post processing. So you can see we did quite a lot. Like this is the original, and this is what we came up with. So, what are we telling? We're saying, hey, it's a kind of it's a colder winter night. There's a bit of this red, fiery red, and in the distance there's another mountain, and there's this kind of yellow in the sky, which I think is kind of interesting in the clouds. It's kind of giving a different kind of ambiance in terms of the sunlight and what are we seeing. So very different than this image. So you can see how quickly post-processing changes the story of the image, the nature of the image. So we're working with just a straight JPEG, not a RAW file. That is what we will be doing next week. We're going to look at how we can take the raw image, work with it, look at some of the HDR adjustments as well that we can do. So the high dynamic range adjustments that you can do with Affinity Photo, and we'll keep working on it from there. So that's our session for today. I hope you can join us again for next week. Next week, same time, 11 o'clock. We'll be doing this. You can rewatch this. So if you are on this right now, you can rewatch this. It just becomes a video right after, same link. Make sure if you want to have reminders to sign up for next week's session in Eventbrite, get another ticket. It will remind you before the event starts. And again, like I said, we really want to thank all our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. The iMacs with Affinity Photo are available there. If you're interested, you can still get it at 50% off through the Affinity site. And also Canada Council for the Arts. Without them, the project would not be possible. So really want to thank everyone. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today. And again, please rewatch, send me questions. You might think of something between now and next week. And if you can email me, I can even discuss that in next week's session. So that's the great thing. Stay interactive and stay in touch with us and let us know. So again, thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next week. All the best. Take care.